Good evening, dear listeners. As you settle into your evening, I invite you to find a comfortable position, allowing your body to sink gently into relaxation. Take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, let go of the day's stresses and concerns. This moment is just for you, a time to unwind, to drift softly into the embrace of sleep. Tonight, we will embark on a journey through a rather peculiar and often overlooked aspect of ancient Roman life, the procedures of the Senate concerning the variations of toga colors. While it may sound mundane, the history we will explore is filled with layers of tradition, subtle nuances, and the slow, rhythmic ebb and flow of bureaucratic deliberation. You might wonder how such a seemingly trivial topic could capture your imagination or lull you into a serene state. However, the beauty of history lies in the details, and the Roman Senate's slow, methodical processes are a testament to the value they placed on order and tradition. As we delve into the minutiae of toga color approvals, you will find that each shade tells a story, each decision holds significance, and every debate resonates with the echoes of a civilization that was remarkably intricate. We will begin our exploration by understanding the importance of the toga itself, a garment that was not merely clothing but a symbol of Roman identity and citizenship. The colors of togas were not arbitrary, they were steeped in meaning and legacy, reflecting the social hierarchy and the values of the time. With soothing words and a gentle tone, we will navigate through the intricate channels of Senate discussions and deliberations that govern these choices, revealing how they shaped societal norms. As we proceed, you will hear about the different hues that adorn the togas of senators, the symbolism behind the shades, and the meticulous processes that guided their approval. We will explore the roles of various senators, the debates that took place, and the eventual resolutions that emerged from these discussions. This slow-paced examination of history will create a tranquil atmosphere, allowing your mind to wander into a landscape of ancient Rome, where the air is filled with the scent of olive trees and the whispers of old stone buildings. Along the way, their stories, while perhaps not as grand as the battles and conquests of their time, offer a glimpse into the quieter side of Roman governance. These tales will unfold like a gentle lullaby, inviting you to close your eyes and picture the scenes as they come alive in your mind. We will also take a moment to reflect on the broader implications of these seemingly trivial procedures. How do they resonate with our own lives? In a world that often feels chaotic and fast-paced, the Romans remind us of the beauty found in deliberation, the calm that comes from order, and the peace that can be achieved through thoughtful discussion. As we transition smoothly into the heart of our exploration, I encourage you to let the soothing cadence of my voice wash over you. Allow yourself to be carried away by the gentle rhythm of history, as we delve into the fascinating yet tranquil world of Roman Senate procedures concerning toga color variations. So, dear listeners, take one more deep breath in and out, and let your mind drift freely as we begin our serene journey into the past, where the colors of togas await to share their muted tales of ancient governance and tradition, inviting you into a deep and restful slumber. Welcome to the calming world of Roman history. The history of Roman Senate procedure concerning the approval of toga color variations can be traced back to the early days of the Roman Republic, specifically around 509 BCE. The toga, a distinctive garment that symbolized Roman citizenship, underwent various modifications and variations throughout the centuries, with the Senate playing a pivotal role in regulating these changes. The examination of the Senate's procedures regarding toga color variations reveals a monotonous yet intricately detailed bureaucratic process. In the year 509 BCE, as Rome transitioned from monarchy to a republican form of governance, the Senate emerged as a principal body of political authority. The Senate convened in the Curia Hostilia, located in the Roman Forum, an architectural structure characterized by its rectangular shape and brick construction, adorned with marble columns and a wooden roof. The Curia served not only as a meeting place but also as a symbol of the Senate's power and authority. It was within these hallowed walls that discussions regarding the regulation of toga colors commenced. The earliest references to toga color variations are found in the annals of the Roman historian Livy, who documented the events of the 1st century BCE. Livy remarks upon the significance of the toga, stating, "The toga embodies the essence of Roman identity, and its colors reflect the virtues of the Republic." This assertion underscores the importance of color variations in the context of Roman society, linking them to broader themes of morality and citizenship. The procedure for approving toga color variations was formalized during the Senate meeting of 300 BCE, where a decree was issued mandating that any proposed changes in toga color must be submitted to the Senate for approval. The decree outlined specific administrative procedures to ensure a systematic approach to the approval process. Proposals were to be presented in writing, accompanied by an explanation of the rationale behind the suggested color change. This documentation was to be submitted to a designated Senate official known as the Magister Toga, a position established to oversee the regulation of toga-related matters. The Magister Toga, a role held by various senators throughout the years, was tasked with reviewing proposals and determining their compliance with established norms. This individual would convene a subcommittee of senators, known colloquially as the Color Committee, tasked with the deliberation of the submission. The Color Committee's composition varied, with membership typically comprising 5 to 7 senators selected for their experience and knowledge in matters pertaining to clothing and societal symbolism. Upon receipt of a proposal, the Color Committee would engage in a thorough examination of the suggested toga color change. This process involved a series of meetings, often tedious in nature, whereby senators would debate the merits and drawbacks of the proposed color. The discussions were typically characterized by a lack of enthusiasm, with participants often reiterating the established norms and precedents. The minutes from these meetings, preserved in the Senate archives, reveal a pattern of repetitive arguments, highlighting the procedural nature of the deliberations. For instance, during a meeting in 198 BCE, a senator named Gaius Flavius proposed the introduction of a vibrant saffron toga, arguing that it would symbolize the dawn of a new era in Roman politics. The minutes from this meeting indicate that deliberations lasted for 3 consecutive days, with senators repeatedly expressing their preference for conservative colors such as white and cream. Ultimately, the proposal was rejected, and Gaius Flavius was advised to consider more traditional hues. The daily routine of the Senate during this period was marked by a strict adherence to schedule. Senate meetings convened at dawn, with senators arriving at the Curia to engage in their discussions. The meetings typically commenced with a reading of the previous day's minutes, followed by a review of new proposals. The Magister Toga would initiate discussions regarding color variations, leading to a protracted exchange of opinions and counterarguments. It was not uncommon for debates to devolve into repetitive cycles of rhetoric, with senators reiterating points made hours or even days earlier. In an effort to streamline the process, the Senate instituted a voting system in 133 BCE, allowing senators to express their approval or disapproval of proposed toga colors through a show of hands. The decision to adopt this method was largely viewed as a means to expedite the lengthy deliberations, although it did little to alter the fundamental nature of the discussions. The minutes from this period reflect a consistent pattern of voting outcomes, with conservative colors consistently winning favor over more audacious proposals. The architectural layout of the Curia further contributed to the monotony of Senate proceedings. The interior of the Curia was sparsely furnished, with wooden benches arranged in a semicircular formation facing a raised platform where the presiding senator would sit. The lack of visual stimuli within the space often led to a somnolent atmosphere, with many senators succumbing to fatigue during lengthy discussions. The dim light filtering through small windows further exacerbated this sense of lethargy, resulting in a subdued ambience conducive to dull discourse. As the centuries progressed, the toga color approval process continued to evolve, albeit in incremental ways. By 44 BCE, the Senate had established a series of guidelines delineating approved toga colors. These guidelines were codified into a document known as the Lex Toga Colorum, which outlined specific shades deemed acceptable for various occasions, including public ceremonies and private functions. The Lex Toga Colorum also stipulated that deviations from the approved color palette would necessitate a formal re-examination by the Senate. The administrative procedures outlined in the Lex Toga Colorum emphasized the importance of uniformity and consistency in toga appearance. Any senator wishing to propose a new color variation was required to submit a detailed report, outlining the proposed color's significance, potential social implications, and a comparison with existing colors. The submission was then subjected to a rigorous review process, wherein it would be scrutinized by the Magister Toga and the Color Committee. The tedious nature of the approval process was exemplified in the case of a proposed indigo toga in 27 BCE, presented by the Senator Lucius Cornelius. Cornelius argued that indigo would symbolize the depth of Roman culture and sophistication. However, after 5 days of debate, the Color Committee ultimately concluded that the color was too reminiscent of foreign customs and rejected the proposal. This decision was met with a collective sigh of resignation among senators, who had grown weary of the repetitive nature of the discussions. Throughout the Principate, the toga's color variations became increasingly intertwined with imperial decrees. Emperor Augustus, recognizing the potential for color variations to reflect political allegiances, sought to centralize control over toga colors. In 19 BCE, Augustus issued the Edict of Toga Colors, which mandated that any changes to the color regulations must be approved by the emperor himself, with the Senate acting merely as an advisory body. This shift in power dynamics further contributed to the monotony of the approval process, as senators found themselves relegated to a subordinate role. The architectural setting of the Senate also adapted to these changes, with the Curia undergoing renovations to accommodate the growing influence of the imperial office. The structure was embellished with intricate mosaics and frescoes depicting the garments of past emperors, serving as a constant reminder of the interplay between toga colors and imperial authority. These renovations, while visually striking, did little to enliven the procedural discussions that took place within its walls. The monotony persisted well into the late Republic and early Empire, with toga color approval procedures remaining largely unchanged. By 14 CE, during the reign of Emperor Tiberius, the Senate's role in the process had diminished further, with the emperor asserting greater control over fashion and its implications for public life. The Color Committee, once a vital component of the approval process, was effectively disbanded, and proposals were now subject to the emperor's discretion alone. The historical record concludes with the observation that the procedures governing toga color variations remained a stagnant aspect of Roman governance, characterized by a lack of dynamism and innovation. The archives of the Senate are replete with minutes detailing proposals and debates that echo the same themes, illustrating the enduring nature of bureaucratic monotony. The toga, once a vibrant symbol of Roman identity, became emblematic of a system entrenched in repetitive administrative processes. In summary, the history of the Roman Senate's procedure for approving toga color variations is a testament to the enduring power of bureaucracy. From the early days of the Republic to the height of the Empire, the processes governing toga color approvals were marked by a series of administrative protocols, daily routines, and architectural settings that contributed to a singularly unremarkable narrative. This account, while exhaustive in detail, ultimately reveals the pervasive dullness that characterized the Senate's approach to regulating one of Rome's most iconic garments. The construction methods and materials employed in the crafting of togas for Roman senators were dictated by a series of strict guidelines established during the late Republic, specifically around 200 BCE. The primary textile utilized in the production of togas was a wool fabric, known as woolen serica, which was derived from the fleece of sheep, primarily sourced from the regions of Latium and Etruria. The quality of this wool was paramount, as it needed to maintain a balance between durability and comfort. The average width of the fabric used for a toga was approximately 2.5 meters, with lengths varying between 4 to 6 meters, depending on the status and stature of the individual senator. The process of weaving the wool into usable toga fabric involved the use of a vertical loom, a common apparatus in Roman textile production. The loom itself typically measured 1.5 meters in height, allowing for the production of wide panels of fabric. The wool would first undergo a cleaning process, known as lanum purgare, which involved soaking the fleece in a mixture of water and natural soaps made from animal fats. Following this, the wool was carded, spun into threads, and then dyed using natural pigments derived from plants, minerals, and insects, with the most common color being a simple white, albus. Maintenance procedures for togas were equally meticulous, reflecting the importance of maintaining the integrity and appearance of this garment. The standard practice for caring for togas involved regular washing, using a method known colloquially as lavare togam. This typically required the fabric to be soaked in cold water for a duration of no less than 24 hours. After soaking, the toga would be gently agitated to remove dirt and grime, then rinsed in clean water before being hung to dry in a shaded area to prevent color fading from direct sunlight. The drying process was crucial, as exposure to harsh sunlight could lead to irreversible discoloration, rendering the garment unsuitable for public appearances. In terms of financial records and costs associated with toga production, the Senate maintained detailed ledgers documenting expenditures related to both the raw materials and labor. As of 120 BCE, the average cost of wool per kilogram was recorded at 3 sestertii, while the labor for skilled weavers was assessed at approximately 5 sestertii per toga produced. This led to an estimated total cost of 15 sestertii for the production of a single toga, factoring in labor, dye, and maintenance. It is noteworthy that these costs were subject to fluctuations based on the annual harvest of wool and the availability of skilled labor. Personnel involved in the toga production process were categorized into specific job descriptions, each with defined duties. The primary role was that of the thlanius, or shearer, responsible for harvesting the wool from sheep during the biannual shearing season, which typically occurred in late spring and early autumn. Following this, the textor, or weaver, would take over the production process, operating the looms and transforming raw wool into finished fabric. The calculator, or dyer, played a critical role in the application of colors, adhering closely to the Senate's approved color palette, which was updated periodically, most recently in 44 BCE, to include variations such as ochre, crimson, and the rare purple derived from murex snails. The technical specifications for the toga were precisely defined in Senate records, with specific measurements and construction details outlined in a decree issued in 67 BCE. The toga was to be draped over the left shoulder, with the length reaching down to the ankles. Senators were required to ensure that the toga had a minimum width of 1.5 meters, allowing for ample fabric to facilitate the characteristic draping style. The toga's design also included a sinus, or fold, which was to be deep enough to accommodate the carrying of small items, such as wax tablets or styluses during Senate meetings. The specifications mandated that the fold must have a depth of no less than 30 centimeters. In summary, the procedural aspects surrounding the construction, maintenance, financial management, personnel involvement, and technical specifications of the toga reflect a deeply ingrained bureaucratic approach to what could be considered a simple garment. This methodical and overly detailed account serves to underscore the subdued nature of Roman Senate deliberations on issues that, to the untrained, may appear trivial, yet were imbued with significant cultural and social implications. The rigid adherence to these procedures ensured that the toga remained a symbol of authority and respect in Roman society, even as the processes behind its approval and production remained laboriously monotonous. The construction methods and materials employed in the crafting of togas for Roman senators were dictated by a series of strict guidelines established during the late Republic, specifically around 200 BCE. This period marked a significant evolution in Roman dress and societal norms, as the toga became not just a garment but a symbol of Roman citizenship and authority. The primary textile utilized in the production of togas was a wool fabric known as woolen serica. This premium wool was derived from the fleece of sheep, primarily sourced from the regions of Latium and Etruria. The quality of this wool was paramount, as it needed to maintain a balance between durability and comfort, allowing the wearer to move freely while projecting an image of dignity. The sheep breeds favored for this wool were specifically bred for their fine fleece, which was meticulously sheared in the spring months, typically around April, ensuring that the fibers were clean and free from any impurities that could detract from the fabric's quality. Once harvested, the wool underwent a thorough cleaning process, where it was washed to remove any lanolin and impurities. This was often done using a mixture of water and natural soap made from the ashes of certain plants. The cleaned wool was then carded, a process that involved separating and aligning the fibers using a series of handheld tools known as carders. This step was critical, as it ensured that the wool would spin evenly when processed into yarn. The spinning of the wool into yarn was an art form in itself. Skilled spinners would use a spindle or a spinning wheel to twist the fibers together tightly, creating a strong thread suitable for weaving. This thread was often dyed using natural dyes extracted from local flora, with colors ranging from rich indigos to vibrant reds. In particular, the dye derived from the madder plant was favored for its ability to produce deep crimson hues, which were often reserved for the togas of high-ranking officials. Weaving was the next step in the garment construction process. The yarn was woven on large looms, typically using a plain weave technique that created a sturdy yet flexible fabric. The weaving process was labor-intensive and required skilled artisans who understood the nuances of tension and pattern. By the 1st century BCE, the introduction of more sophisticated looms allowed for more complex designs, including the addition of a characteristic purple stripe, known as the latus clavus, which indicated senatorial rank. This stripe was typically about 2 inches wide and ran vertically down the length of the toga, setting senators apart from lower-ranking citizens, who wore a toga without such adornment. The toga itself was constructed in a manner that allowed for a single piece of fabric, often measuring around 12 to 20 feet in length and 6 to 10 feet in width, to be draped elegantly around the body. The process of draping was an art form that required training and skill, as the toga needed to be arranged in such a way that it fell gracefully over the wearer's form while also allowing for ease of movement. The fabric was typically folded in a specific sequence. The wearer would first position the toga over one shoulder before wrapping it around the back and under the opposite arm. This created a layered effect that was both functional and aesthetically pleasing. In terms of historical context, the toga emerged as a distinctive garment during the early days of the Roman Republic, around the mid-6th century BCE. Initially, it was a practical garment worn by both men and women, but over time, its symbolism evolved. By the late Republic, particularly during the 1st century BCE, the toga became synonymous with Roman identity. The shift was significantly influenced by political and social changes, including the rise of powerful families and the establishment of a more defined class system. The toga was thus not merely a garment but a representation of one's social standing and rights as a citizen. Moreover, the toga was often associated with specific occasions and societal roles. For instance, the toga praetexta, which featured a purple border, was worn by magistrates and young boys before they reached adulthood. In contrast, The toga virilis, a plain white toga, was donned by adult male citizens as a rite of passage. This clear differentiation in attire further emphasized the societal hierarchy that was prevalent in Roman culture. Examining the significance of the toga leads to a broader understanding of Roman society. The crafting of togas was not merely a reflection of fashion but was deeply intertwined with the political and cultural fabric of Rome. The careful selection of materials, the artistry involved in the weaving and draping processes, and the adherence to societal norms all contributed to the toga's prominence. In 63 BCE, for instance, Cicero famously donned his toga during his consulship to assert his authority and influence during the Catalan conspiracy, highlighting how the toga was a powerful visual declaration of political allegiance and status. In summary, the process of constructing togas for Roman senators was a complex interplay of materials, craftsmanship, and cultural significance. From the careful selection of high-quality wool to the intricate techniques employed in weaving and draping, every aspect of toga creation was steeped in tradition and symbolism. The toga not only served as a garment but also as a critical marker of identity, citizenship, and rank within the intricate social hierarchy of ancient Rome. By the end of the Republic, around 27 BCE, the toga had solidified its place as a quintessential emblem of Roman culture, one that echoed the values and ideals of a civilization that deeply revered its history and traditions. The construction methods and materials utilized in the production of togas were notably standardized throughout the Republic and into the Empire, reflecting the importance of this garment in Roman society. Initially, the fabric of choice for togas was wool, a material that provided the necessary drape and weight. The use of wool can be traced back to as early as the 3rd century BCE, when evidence from archaeological finds indicates that local sheep breeds were domesticated specifically for this purpose. The typical wool toga measured approximately 3.5 meters in width and 5 to 6 meters in length, allowing for adequate coverage and a graceful drape when worn. In the construction of togas, the initial step involved the shearing of sheep, which generally took place in the spring months, specifically from April to June. Following shearing, the wool was cleaned and carded, a process that involved separating and aligning the fibers to prepare them for spinning. The resulting yarn was then dyed using natural dyes derived from local flora. Notably, the color variations were determined by the type and quantity of plant materials used. For instance, the deep purple hue, reserved for the senators' togas, was achieved using the murex snail, a labor-intensive process that contributed significantly to the overall cost of the garment. Once dyed, the wool was spun into thread, a process that was typically performed by women in domestic settings. The standard spinning wheel of the era measured approximately 1.2 meters in height, and the thread produced had a diameter of around 0.5 millimeters. Following spinning, the threads were woven into fabric using looms, which were commonly made of wood and measured about 1.5 meters across. The weaving process could take several days, depending on the complexity of the design and the experience of the weaver. Maintenance procedures for togas were established to ensure longevity and uphold the dignity associated with this garment. Due to the delicate nature of wool, regular cleaning was essential. The recommended method involved gentle hand washing in lukewarm water mixed with a solution of natural soap derived from olive oil. This practice was codified into the Senate's edict on garment care as early as 50 BCE, with specific guidelines documented in the annals of the Senate archives. Additional maintenance procedures included periodic brushing with a soft bristle brush to remove dirt and lint. This task was often assigned to household slaves, who were trained specifically in the care of garments. The annual maintenance budget for a senator's toga was set at approximately 10 denarii, a sum that covered washing, repairs, and any necessary re-dyeing. Financial records regarding toga production and maintenance reveal a complex system of costs spread across various stages of the garment's life cycle. In 33 BCE, a detailed ledger presented to the Senate outlined the costs associated with the procurement of wool, dye materials, labor, and maintenance. The average cost of raw wool was approximately 4 denarii per meter, while dyes could cost upwards of 20 denarii per batch, depending on the hue. The total expenditure for a single toga could range from 50 to 100 denarii, reflecting both the quality of materials and the labor involved. Personnel involved in the toga-making process included shepherds, dyers, spinners, weavers, and maintenance staff. Each role was critical to the overall production and upkeep of the toga. Shepherds were typically employed by large estates and would oversee herds of sheep ranging from 50 to 200 individuals. Their role not only included the care and management of the flock but also extended to the selection of sheep breeds specifically suited for high-quality wool production. Dyers, often found in urban settings, were skilled artisans who operated dye houses where they would process raw wool. The dyeing process was both an art and a science. It required careful measurement of dye plants and precise temperature control. A typical dye house would contain several large vats, each capable of holding up to 200 liters of dye solution. The ratio of wool to dye was meticulously calculated to ensure even coloration, with ratios often cited as 1:10 for lighter shades and up to 1:3 for deeper colors. Spinners and weavers were typically grouped together in guilds, which provided training and support for individuals entering the trade. These guilds were established in the early 1st century BCE, and records indicate that membership could include several dozen individuals, each specializing in a particular aspect of the production process. Spinners would produce several hundred meters of thread per day, while weavers could complete the weaving of a single toga in approximately 2 weeks, assuming no interruptions due to material shortages or labor disputes. The technical specifications for the toga were laid out in numerous Senate decrees, with particular attention paid to the draping technique. The toga is characterized by a semicircular shape and was meant to be worn draped over the left shoulder and wrapped around the body, with a portion left hanging down at the back. The standard toga's dimensions were codified in 27 BCE, establishing that the tapering end of the toga should measure no less than 1 meter in width at the widest point, gradually tapering to about 0.5 meters at the hem. In the realm of color variations, the Senate established a strict code delineating the appropriate colors for different ranks within Roman society. The toga praetexta, adorned with a purple border, was designated for magistrates and young boys of noble birth, while the toga candida, a bright white garment, was favored by candidates for public office. The toga pulla, a darker toga, was typically worn during periods of mourning. This classification system was formalized in 44 BCE, when the Senate enacted a law specifying the precise shades and proportions of each color, ensuring uniformity and adherence to social norms. These regulations surrounding toga colors and construction were not merely aesthetic choices but were deeply intertwined with the political and social fabric of Roman life. The approval process for any new color variation was a lengthy and bureaucratic affair, requiring petitions to be submitted to the Senate, often accompanied by samples of the proposed fabric. The Senate would convene to discuss the implications of the new color on societal hierarchy and subsequently vote on the matter, with records meticulously kept to document each decision. In summary, the history of toga construction, maintenance, financial considerations, personnel roles, and technical specifications reveals a deeply interconnected system that underscored the significance of this garment in Roman culture. The toga was not merely clothing, it was a symbol of civic duty, social standing, and cultural identity that was maintained through meticulous standards and procedures. The legislation and processes surrounding toga variations reflect the Romans' commitment to order, tradition, and the maintenance of their societal values, demonstrating that even in the seemingly mundane aspects of life, there lies a profound connection to the ethos of the civilization. The construction of the Senate chamber, where the deliberations on toga color variations transpired, was a meticulous process that adhered strictly to the architectural norms of ancient Rome. The chamber was originally constructed in 509 BCE, during the early years of the Roman Republic. The walls of the chamber were made from travertine, a form of limestone that was abundant in the region. The use of travertine was not merely aesthetic, it provided durability and acoustics conducive to the oratory skills that were highly prized in Roman politics. The roof was constructed using a series of wooden beams, primarily sourced from the forests of Cisalpine Gaul. These beams measured approximately 20 centimeters in width and were treated with various oils to preserve their integrity against the elements. The ceiling was adorned with plaster that was painted in muted hues, reflecting the conservative nature of the Senate's proceedings. The total area of the chamber was approximately 400 square meters, which allowed for ample space for the senators, who typically sat in a semicircular formation to facilitate discussion. Maintenance of the Senate chamber was governed by a set of procedures that ensured the longevity of the structure. Each year, during the month of Ides, a thorough inspection was conducted by a designated committee of senators known as the Custodes Edificiorum. This committee was responsible for evaluating the structural integrity of the building and ensuring that it remained a place of solemn deliberation. The inspections typically involved visual assessments for cracks in the walls, deterioration of wooden beams, and signs of water damage on the plaster ceilings. In terms of financial records, the costs associated with both construction and maintenance were carefully documented in the Annals, the official record-keeping system of the Senate. For instance, in 45 BCE, the Senate allocated a budget of 10,000 sestertii for the restoration of the chamber's roof, which had suffered damage due to an unusually heavy rainfall season. The costs were broken down into labor, 3,000 sestertii, materials, 6,000 sestertii, and miscellaneous expenses, 1,000 sestertii, for tools and transportation of materials. Each expense was meticulously documented by the quaestor, the financial officer of the Senate, whose job it was to ensure that all expenditures were justified and recorded in the public ledger. The personnel involved in both the construction and maintenance of the chamber included a variety of specialized roles. The chief architect, or architectus, was responsible for the overall design of the chamber and coordinated with laborers, who were typically skilled craftsmen known as faber. These laborers were divided into several categories based on their skills: carpenters, lignarii, masons, lapicity, and plasterers, stuccators. Each group had job descriptions that outlined their specific responsibilities. For example, the carpenters were tasked with constructing and installing the wooden beams and seats, while the masons focused on the stonework essential for the structural integrity of the chamber. Technical specifications for the chamber were outlined in the edicts issued by the Senate. These specifications included precise measurements for seating arrangements and spacing. For instance, each senator was allotted a space measuring 1.5 meters in width, which allowed for comfortable seating while maintaining a sense of order. The height of the chamber was approximately 5 meters to accommodate the grandeur of the proceedings, and the acoustics were carefully considered. The angles of the walls were designed to reflect sound towards the center of the room, allowing for clear communication. The debate over toga color variations, a seemingly trivial matter, was steeped in tradition, and the procedures surrounding it required adherence to a rigid set of protocols. On the first day of deliberation, a senator would propose a new color variation. This proposal had to be documented, and the senator was required to present a rationale for the suggested change, which had to be rooted in historical precedents or the prevailing political climate. The proposal would then be assigned to a subcommittee, known as the Comitia Colorum, comprised of senators with expertise in fashion, symbolism, and cultural significance. The Comitia Colorum would conduct a thorough investigation into the proposed color, examining historical records dating back to the founding of Rome. This included analyzing the use of colors in previous toga styles, their associations with particular magistracies, and their implications for social status. The committee would compile a report, which included detailed descriptions of the color variations, potential sources for dyes, and comparisons with other established colors. Once the report was submitted, a public hearing was held in the chamber, where senators could voice their opinions on the proposal. This process was formalized and recorded in the official Senate minutes, ensuring a comprehensive account of the proceedings for posterity. The minutes included information such as the names of senators who spoke, their positions on the proposed color, and any relevant historical anecdotes cited during the debate. After extensive deliberations, a vote was held. Senators were required to cast their votes in a manner that maintained decorum and order. The voting process involved the use of colored pebbles, white for approval and black for disapproval. Each senator would cast their vote in a designated voting box, and the results were tallied by the quaestor, who reported the outcome to the assembly. In the event of a tie, the presiding consul had the authority to cast the deciding vote, a power that was both revered and feared. The entire process of approving a toga color variation could take several months, as the Senate would often reconvene multiple times to discuss amendments or additional proposals. For example, in 33 BCE, the Senate deliberated for a total of 6 months before approving the introduction of a deep purple toga, traditionally reserved for emperors, which was deemed appropriate for high-ranking military commanders. This lengthy process underscored the importance of maintaining established norms while allowing for the evolution of fashion within the constraints of Roman tradition. In conclusion, the history of toga color variations in the Roman Senate reflects a broader narrative of order, tradition, and societal values. The construction and maintenance of the Senado, the detailed financial records, the specialized personnel, and the stringent technical specifications all contributed to a system that, while seemingly mundane, was crucial in upholding the dignity and decorum of Roman governance. As the Senate navigated the complexities of color symbolism, they were not merely debating fabric choices, they were engaging in a dialogue about identity, authority, and the very essence of Roman culture itself. The construction methods and materials used in the production of togas for the Roman Senate were dictated by a rigid adherence to established norms and standards, reflecting the importance of this garment in Roman society. The primary material employed in toga construction was wool, specifically sheep wool sourced from the regions of Latium and Etruria. The quality of the wool was paramount. It was essential that it met the standards of fineness and durability as prescribed by the Senate's regulations. The process of wool preparation began with shearing, which typically occurred in early spring, around the months of April and May. The shearing was conducted using curved metal shears, which were often crafted from bronze and measured approximately 20 centimeters in length. After shearing, the wool underwent a meticulous cleaning process, involving washing in water mixed with lye to remove grease and dirt. This cleaning phase was critical, as any residue could impair the dyeing process. Dyeing the wool was a complex endeavor, often taking place in specialized dye workshops known as tinctoria. The dyeing agents varied depending on the desired color, with natural dyes derived from plants, minerals, and insects being most prevalent. For instance, the deep purple hue associated with senatorial togas, known as purpura, was obtained from the murex snail, specifically the species Murex brandaris, and required the collection of thousands of snails to produce just a few grams of dye. The dyeing process itself could take several days, as the wool was soaked in a mordant solution before being immersed in the dye bath for hours, sometimes even days, depending on the intensity of the desired color. Once dyed, the wool was dried in a shaded area to prevent fading, after which it was spun into fabric. The standard toga fabric measured approximately 3 meters in width and 5 meters in length, with variations depending on the rank and status of the wearer. The fabric was then woven using a simple loom, which was typically made of wood and measured about 1.5 meters in height, allowing for the intricate patterns and textures that were a hallmark of high-quality togas. Maintenance procedures for togas were equally regimented. The upkeep of these garments was not merely a matter of personal preference, it was a societal obligation. To preserve the integrity of the toga, senators were expected to adhere to specific maintenance routines. Washing was typically performed using a solution of water and mild detergents, such as diluted soap made from olive oil. It was recommended that togas be washed bi-weekly, particularly before significant public appearances, to ensure that the garment remained pristine. In cases of severe staining or wear, professional cleaners known as full ones were employed. The full ones utilized a process involving a combination of washing, beating, and drying the fabric, which could take up to 3 days for a single toga. The cost of employing a full ones ranged from 5 to 10 denarii per toga, depending on the severity of the cleaning required. Records from the late Republic indicate that the Senate allocated an annual budget of approximately 5,000 denarii for the maintenance of senatorial togas, an expense deemed necessary to uphold the dignity of the Roman political class. The financial records and costs associated with toga production and maintenance were meticulously documented by the state. In 54 BCE, it was noted in the Senate's financial ledger that the average cost of materials for a single toga amounted to approximately 15 denarii, including wool, dye, and labor. The cost of construction fluctuated based on market conditions, with a notable spike occurring in 49 BCE, when the price of murex dye surged due to a decrease in supply, raising the average toga cost to 25 denarii. These financial records also revealed the complexities involved in the procurement of materials. The Senate had established contracts with various suppliers, ensuring that high-quality wool and dyes were consistently available. For example, in 52 BCE, a contract was awarded to a supplier from Etruria, which stipulated the delivery of 500 kilograms of wool annually at a fixed rate of 12 denarii per kilogram. This contract played a crucial role in stabilizing the toga market, particularly in the lead-up to major political events such as elections and triumphal parades. In terms of personnel and job descriptions, the toga production and maintenance process involved a variety of specialized roles. The primary figures included the toga maker, toga fabricator, who was responsible for the cutting and sewing of the fabric. This individual typically had a background in textile arts, often having undergone an apprenticeship lasting between 3 to 5 years. The toga maker's workspace, usually a modest workshop measuring around 30 square meters, was equipped with essential tools such as scissors, spindles, and sewing needles, which were typically made of bronze. Additionally, the role of the dyer, tinctor, was crucial in the production process. The dyer was well versed in the art of color application, often requiring extensive knowledge of various dyeing techniques and chemical reactions. The dyer's workshop was often adjacent to the toga maker's establishment, facilitating collaboration. It was common for dyers to specialize in particular colors, with some being recognized for their expertise in purpura, while others might focus on shades of red or yellow. The full ones, or cleaners, played a critical role in the maintenance of togas, as previously mentioned. These individuals were skilled in cleaning techniques that ensured the longevity of the garments. The full ones often worked in larger teams within a facility that could accommodate several togas at once, with processing areas dedicated to washing, drying, and ironing. Their facilities were generally equipped with large vats for soaking and beating the fabric, which were often made from wood or stone and measured approximately 2 meters in length. As for technical specifications, the toga itself was designed with particular dimensions and features that conveyed the wearer's status. The standard toga, known as the toga pura, was characterized by its simple, unadorned design. It was a semicircular piece of fabric that enveloped the body, typically worn over a tunic. The measurements of the toga were carefully prescribed, approximately 3 meters wide and 5 meters long for the average citizen, while senatorial togas were often wider, measuring up to 4 meters in width. In contrast, the toga praetexta, which featured a distinctive purple border, was reserved for those holding high office. This specific toga measured slightly differently, often incorporating an additional 10 centimeters in width to accommodate the extra fabric required for the border. The technical specifications of these garments were detailed in various Senate decrees, which often referenced the appropriate dimensions and colors to be used, thus ensuring uniformity across the senatorial class. In conclusion, the history of toga color variations and the intricate processes involved in their construction, maintenance, and financial oversight reflect the broader socio-political landscape of ancient Rome. The attention to detail in materials, costs, and labor roles underscores the significance of the toga as a symbol of Roman identity and authority. As the Senate engaged in its monotonous deliberations regarding color variations, it was, in essence, reaffirming the cultural fabric of Rome itself, one thread at a time. The monotonous history of Roman Senate procedure for approving toga color variations, Part 6. Regional variations and comparisons. As the Roman Republic expanded its territories, it encountered a myriad of cultures and traditions, each with their own unique relationship with textiles and dyes. The toga, an emblematic garment of Roman identity, became subject to regional variations that were reflected not only in its color but also in its fabric and draping style. In the provinces, the Senate had to navigate these local customs delicately, for the approval process of toga color variations did not occur in a vacuum. In the provinces of Gaul, for instance, the introduction of vibrant hues like indigo, derived from the native woad plant, presented a challenge to conventional Roman aesthetics, which typically favored muted tones. The Senate, wary of the implications of such flamboyant colors on Roman masculinity and dignity, initiated an inquiry into the fabric's origins and dyeing methods. This inquiry became a protracted bureaucratic process, culminating in a Senate decree in 82 BC that permitted the use of indigo only for the ceremonial togas of provincial governors, thus establishing a hierarchy even among the colors permitted. Conversely, in the eastern provinces, particularly in regions like Asia Minor and Syria, the influence of local artisans introduced intricate patterns and multicolored dye techniques. The Senate faced a considerable dilemma: should it allow these vibrant, patterned togas to infiltrate the Roman elite's attire? After months of deliberation, a compromise was struck in 54 BC, allowing for a limited acceptance of patterns, provided they adhered to a strict guideline of modesty and did not distract from the toga's inherent symbolism of Roman citizenship. Thus, the regional variations of toga colors and styles necessitated an ongoing dialogue within the Senate, illustrating the complexities of administering a vast and diverse empire. The process was not merely about aesthetics, it was a reflection of cultural integration, resistance, and the ever-evolving identity of Roman citizenship. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of toga color approval procedures reveals much about the shifting political and social landscape of Rome itself. Initially, during the early Republic, the toga's color was predominantly white, symbolizing purity and civic virtue. However, as Rome transitioned from a republic to an empire, the toga underwent significant transformations both in color and in its symbolic significance. During the late Republic, the emergence of political factions led to the introduction of colors that represented allegiances. The populace, for instance, favored the use of darker shades, while the optimates maintained a preference for lighter hues. This dichotomy resulted in a series of Senate debates, documented meticulously in the annals of Roman history, where proposed color variations became synonymous with political ideologies. The introduction of the purple toga, reserved exclusively for emperors, marks a pivotal moment in this evolution. Augustus, keenly aware of the toga's symbolism, formalized its status through a series of edicts that regulated who could wear what color, thereby consolidating power through sartorial means. As the empire expanded, the approval process for toga colors became increasingly bureaucratic. The establishment of the curators togae, a specialized committee tasked with overseeing the toga color regulations, signified a new era of institutional governance over attire. This committee, composed of esteemed senators and skilled dyers, became responsible for not only approving color variations but also for standardizing the quality of dyes used. By the time of the Severan emperors, the introduction of a color palette that included shades such as saffron and cerulean reflected the empire's wealth and the increasingly lavish lifestyles of its elite. The evolution of toga color approval procedures thus serves as a microcosm of Rome's broader socio-political evolution, illustrating how clothing became an arena for negotiation, power struggles, and identity formation. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The bureaucratic regulations surrounding toga color approval were notably intricate, demanding a level of procedural adherence that would make modern regulatory frameworks appear simplistic by comparison. The Senate's establishment of a formal protocol for the approval of toga colors included a series of steps, each laden with its own requirements. Initially, a senator or a group of senators would propose a new color variation, supported by a detailed report from local textile producers outlining the dye's source, its ethical implications, and its potential impact on Roman values. This report was submitted to the Senatus Consultum, which would then assign a committee to review the proposal. The committee, comprised of members from various regions, was tasked with evaluating the potential ramifications of the new color within their respective locales. After thorough deliberation, a recommendation was made, which would then be presented to the Senate for a vote. This process often spanned months, if not years, as political alliances and rivalries played a pivotal role in shaping the outcomes of these votes. The requirement for a supermajority vote added further complexity, thus, the approval of a new color often became a battleground for political maneuvering, with senators leveraging their influence to sway opinions. Further regulations stipulated that once a color was approved, a set of guidelines regarding its use was to be disseminated throughout the empire. These guidelines often included stipulations on the occasions for which specific colors were deemed appropriate, the rank of citizens permitted to wear them, and the necessary quality of the dyes. Such meticulous regulations were symptomatic of the Roman Senate's desire to maintain order and propriety within the fabric of Roman society, reflecting their enduring commitment to the preservation of tradition. Supply chain and logistics. The supply chain and logistics surrounding the Toga color approval processes were equally labyrinthine. The production of dyes, particularly those derived from natural sources, necessitated a sophisticated understanding of agricultural cycles and trade routes. The Senate had to navigate these logistical challenges to ensure that the approved colors were not only available but also sustainable. The primary sources of dye were geographically diverse, with indigo coming from Gaul, saffron from the eastern provinces, and the coveted Tyrian purple originating from the coastal cities of Phoenicia. The Senate's reliance on these regions meant that any disruption, be it due to political instability, natural disasters, or trade embargoes, could have significant ramifications for the Toga color approval process. Thus, a contingency plan was often established, allowing for the temporary use of alternative colors in the event of supply shortages. Moreover, the logistics of transporting these dyes to Rome added another layer of complexity. The Senate employed an extensive network of traders and merchants, who were responsible for ensuring that high-quality dyes reached the capital. These merchants were often required to provide proof of the dye's origins, the ethicality of its production, and its compliance with the Senate's stringent guidelines. Failure to adhere to these regulations could result in severe penalties, including the revocation of trading licenses and public humiliation. The Senate's involvement in the dye supply chain also extended to the regulation of dyeing practices. It mandated that dyeing workshops maintain certain standards of operation, including the use of environmentally friendly practices to ensure the sustainability of dye sources. This intricate web of supply chain management highlights the extent to which the Roman Senate was engaged in the minutiae of textile production and the lengths to which it would go to uphold the integrity of Roman attire. Record-keeping methods. The record-keeping methods employed by the Roman Senate concerning Toga color approvals were as methodical as the processes themselves. The meticulous documentation served not only as a historical record but also as a reference point for future deliberations. The Senate maintained a comprehensive archive known as the Tabulae Togae, where each proposed color, its approval status, and the accompanying deliberative notes were meticulously catalogued. The record-keeping process was often labor-intensive, involving multiple scribes who specialized in various aspects of the documentation process. These scribes were responsible for transcribing proposals, committee recommendations, and voting outcomes onto wax tablets or parchment scrolls, which were then stored in designated chambers within the Senate building. The use of a standardized format for these records ensured consistency and facilitated ease of access for future reference. The Tabulae Togae also included detailed annotations regarding the societal implications of each approved color, based on public sentiment and political climate. Regular audits of this archive were conducted to ensure its accuracy and relevance, with senior senators tasked with overseeing the integrity of the records. This bureaucratic diligence contributed to the Senate's credibility in matters of public attire, as citizens could reference the archives to understand the historical context behind specific color regulations. In conclusion, The tedious history of the Roman Senate's procedure for approving toga color variations encapsulates a multifaceted narrative of regional variations, bureaucratic intricacies, and the evolution of societal norms. The meticulous nature of the Senate's processes underscores the importance of appearance in Roman identity, revealing the intricate relationship between clothing, politics, and cultural expression. The laborious attention to detail in record-keeping, supply chain logistics, and regulatory frameworks not only highlights the Senate's commitment to maintaining order but also reflects the complexities of governing an empire that was as colorful in its attire as it was diverse in its inhabitants. #The monotonous history of Roman Senate procedure for approving toga color variations. Part 7, Regional Variations and Comparisons. Throughout the expansive territories of the Roman Empire, regional variations in the toga color approval process emerged, reflecting local customs, climatic conditions, and socio-political contexts. The Senate's bureaucratic procedures concerning toga colors were not uniform, rather, they evolved to accommodate the diverse cultures and practices within the empire. In the provinces of Gaul, for instance, the approval process adopted a more decentralized approach. Local magistrates often held jurisdiction over toga color decisions, resulting in a plethora of hues that were often influenced by the local flora and fauna. The vibrant greens and yellows inspired by the meadows and vineyards became popular, as these colors symbolized fertility and prosperity. This regional autonomy sometimes led to disputes with the central Senate in Rome, which preferred a more standardized palette reflective of traditional Roman values, primarily muted whites and deep reds. Conversely, in the eastern provinces, particularly in regions like Asia Minor, the toga color approval process was heavily influenced by Hellenistic traditions. The Senate faced challenges as local leaders, accustomed to a more flamboyant display of colors, advocated for the inclusion of bright purples and blues, colors traditionally reserved for nobility and royalty. The Senate's response was often a lengthy deliberation that involved extensive consultations with local leaders, as they sought to balance respect for local traditions with the overarching need to maintain Roman authority. This regional diversity was not merely a matter of aesthetic preference but often had implications for political allegiance. Colors could signify loyalty to Rome or a burgeoning local identity. For example, the use of a particular shade of red in the provinces of North Africa became associated with regional rebellions, prompting the Senate to issue edicts that restricted the use of certain colors in an attempt to quell dissent. Part 8, Evolution over different time periods. The history of toga color approval is inherently tied to the larger socio-political evolution of Rome itself. The earliest phases of Roman history, characterized by the Republic, saw a relatively straightforward and less formalized procedure for toga color approval. During this period, the Senate primarily focused on functionality rather than aesthetics. The primary concern was ensuring that the toga served its purpose as a symbol of Roman citizenship and civic duty. However, as the empire expanded and the complexities of governance increased, so too did the procedures surrounding toga color approval. The transition from the Republic to the imperial era marked a significant shift in bureaucratic practices. Under Augustus, the first emperor, there was a concerted effort to codify and formalize the Toga color approval process. This was partly a means to reinforce imperial authority and instill a sense of unity across the diverse provinces. The emperor's edicts laid down strict guidelines on the acceptable colors and patterns, which were meticulously documented and disseminated through the empire. During the late empire, particularly in the 3rd and 4th centuries AD, the Toga color approval process reflected the increasing fragmentation of the empire and the rise of regional powers. The Senate's authority waned as local leaders began to exert more influence over color approval, leading to a patchwork of practices that often contradicted one another. The historical records from this period indicate a proliferation of decrees and counter-decrees as the Senate struggled to maintain coherence amidst growing regional autonomy. The eventual decline of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century further complicated the Toga color approval process. With the loss of central authority, various barbarian tribes began to adopt and adapt Roman customs, including toga colors. The traditional Roman toga, once a symbol of unity, began to fragment into myriad local interpretations, each imbued with distinct cultural meanings. This evolution highlights the dynamic interplay between cultural identity and bureaucratic processes, as the toga slowly transformed from a symbol of Roman citizenship to a canvas for regional expression. Part 9 Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. The bureaucratic framework surrounding toga color approval was extensive and often labyrinthine. A plethora of regulations governed the nuances of color selection, each stipulating not only the colors themselves but also the contexts in which they could be worn. A detailed examination of these regulations reveals a rigid hierarchy of authority, with the Senate at the apex, followed by various magistrates, and ultimately local officials who enforced the laws at the community level. One of the most significant pieces of legislation regarding toga colors was the Lex Togae, promulgated in 24 BC under Augustus. This law explicitly enumerated the acceptable colors for togas, categorizing them into 3 primary classes: those for senators, equestrians, and the common populace. Senators were permitted to wear togas of a rich purple hue, a color that symbolized their elevated status, while equestrians were limited to a lighter shade of purple. The common citizens were relegated to the more mundane white or off-white colors, a regulation that underscored the social stratification inherent in Roman society. Beneath the surface of these regulations lay a complex system of enforcement. Local officials were required to maintain meticulous records of toga colors worn at public events, often leading to a bureaucratic nightmare of compliance and monitoring. The officials were tasked with ensuring that citizens adhered to the regulations, with penalties for transgressors ranging from fines to public humiliation. The meticulous nature of this enforcement is well documented in historical records, which detail instances of citizens being summoned to the local magistrate's court to explain their color choices. Moreover, the Senate periodically convened to review and amend these regulations, often in response to changing social dynamics or political pressures. The process of amending the Lex Togae involved extensive debate and deliberation, with senators presenting arguments both for and against proposed changes. These proceedings were often lengthy, sometimes dragging on for days, as senators engaged in the minutiae of color theory and symbolism. Hashtag Part 10, Supply Chain and Logistics. The Toga color approval process was intricately linked to the supply chain and logistics of dye production and fabric distribution. The colors permissible for togas were not merely abstract concepts but were directly tied to the availability of certain dyes and materials. The most coveted colors, such as the deep Tyrian purple, were derived from the murex snail and required extensive labor and resources to produce, resulting in significant economic implications. The logistics of dye procurement were complex. The Senate often found itself embroiled in political negotiations with dye suppliers, both local and provincial. The production of dyes was a labor-intensive process that required specific environmental conditions, leading to a reliance on certain regions for particular colors. For instance, the production of saffron yellow dye was primarily concentrated in southern Gaul, while the vibrant reds were primarily sourced from North Africa. The transportation of these materials to Rome and other provinces necessitated a reliable infrastructure of roads and trade routes. In times of crisis, such as during the Punic Wars or periods of civil unrest, the supply chains were frequently disrupted, leading to shortages of acceptable toga colors. The Senate's response often involved emergency measures, including the temporary approval of alternative colors or the establishment of state-sponsored dye production facilities. These measures, however, were often met with resistance from local producers, who viewed them as unwarranted interference in their livelihoods. The logistics of toga color approval also extended to the distribution and sale of togas themselves. Tailors and merchants were required to navigate a strict regulatory environment that dictated not only the colors they could offer but also the quality of the materials used. The Senate instituted a quality control mechanism that mandated inspections of fabric and dye to ensure compliance with established standards. This oversight was essential in maintaining the integrity of Roman citizenship and the symbolism of the toga. Hashtag Part 11, Record-keeping methods. The meticulous nature of toga color approval necessitated a sophisticated system of record-keeping. The Romans, renowned for their administrative prowess, developed a variety of methods to document the approval process, ensuring transparency and accountability. Records were maintained in both written and oral forms, with local officials often required to assemble detailed reports summarizing color approvals, social implications, and any infractions that occurred. The primary method of documentation involved the use of wax tablets, which were inscribed with a stylus. These tablets were lightweight and portable, allowing officials to easily carry them in the field. Depending on the nature of the approval, entries could be made in real time during public events, ensuring an accurate account of toga colors. Once the events concluded, the tablets would be stored in the local magistrate's office, forming a repository of historical data that could be referenced in future proceedings. In addition to tablets, public inscriptions were also employed to communicate new regulations or amendments to the Lex Togae. Large stone tablets, inscribed with the latest decrees, were erected in central locations, allowing citizens to remain informed about the color standards. This practice not only served to educate the populace but also acted as a deterrent against infractions, as public visibility fostered a sense of accountability. Over time, the record-keeping methodologies surrounding toga color approvals became increasingly sophisticated. The introduction of parchment and ink allowed for more durable documentation. These records were often compiled into annual reports that summarized the toga color trends of each year, reflecting societal shifts and the influence of local customs. The Senate's archives housed these compilations, which were frequently consulted by senators as they deliberated on potential changes to the Lex Togae. In conclusion, the history of toga color variations and the Senate's procedures for their approval encapsulate a rich tapestry of cultural, political, and bureaucratic complexities. As Rome evolved from a fledgling republic into a vast empire, the processes governing toga color approval adapted to the shifting landscape, revealing the intricate connections between color, identity, and authority. The regional variations, coupled with the bureaucratic regulations, supply chain logistics, and record-keeping methods, illuminate the often overlooked minutiae of Roman governance, underscoring the extent to which even the simplest aspects of daily life were imbued with significance in the context of Roman society. The monotonous history of Roman Senate procedure for approving toga color variations. Part 8: Regional Variations and Comparisons. In the expansive realm of Roman governance, regional variations manifested distinctly within the procedural frameworks governing toga color modifications. The Republic of Rome, encompassing a multitude of provinces and territories, employed a mosaic of local customs that informed the Senate's deliberative practices. For instance, in the provinces of Gaul, where the Gallic tribes had their own richly colored textiles, the Senate often faced the dilemma of reconciling local preferences with the overarching Roman aesthetic. The toga, a symbol of Roman citizenship and cultural identity, could not be arbitrarily altered without due consideration of its implications on both the Roman ethos and local sensibilities. The Senate's procedural discourse regarding toga color in Gaul often included representatives from provincial councils, who would present their constituents' desires for specific hues that reflected local identity. Such discussions would sometimes devolve into intense debates, with senators invoking the ancestral traditions of both the Romans and the Gauls. The resulting compromises could lead to the approval of specific colors, such as the deep greens favored by the Gallic aristocracy, which were considered suitable for formal occasions, albeit with the caveat that such colors would only be permissible under strict regulatory frameworks. In contrast, in the eastern provinces, particularly in regions such as Asia Minor and the Levant, the Senate encountered a different set of challenges. The rich tradition of dyeing in these areas, utilizing exotic materials like indigo and saffron, often clashed with the more austere Roman palette. The Senate's approval process here became an intricate negotiation, balancing the desire for innovation with the need to maintain the integrity of Roman traditions. Proposals for vibrant colors, such as the bright yellows derived from saffron blooms, frequently required extensive deliberation, as senators weighed the potential societal disruptions that might arise from adopting such flamboyant hues. Part 9: Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of toga color approval procedures throughout the various epochs of Roman history can be delineated into distinct phases, each marked by specific socio-political dynamics. During the early Republic, 509 to 27 BCE, the toga was predominantly white, signifying purity and civic duty. The Senate's procedures were relatively straightforward, with few color variations permitted. The color's symbolism was paramount. Only the elite could don the purple toga, known as the toga picta, which was reserved for triumphal celebrations and special occasions. As Rome transitioned into the imperial phase, 27 BCE, for 76 CE, the bureaucratic machinery began to expand, reflecting the complexities of an increasingly diverse empire. The introduction of the toga pulla, a darker toga worn during mourning, necessitated the establishment of formalized procedures for color variations to address the needs of the populace in mourning rituals. This period also saw the emergence of the toga candida, a color adopted by candidates for public office, which demanded a comprehensive re-evaluation of the existing procedures for color approvals. The late imperial period was characterized by a further proliferation of toga colors, influenced by a burgeoning textile industry and the growing influx of materials from far-off lands. The increased availability of dyes led to a greater variety of hues being proposed for Senate approval. By this time, the approval process had become labyrinthine, requiring extensive consultations, debates, and sometimes even roll call votes to ascertain the Senate's collective stance on specific color variations. Part 10: Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. The bureaucratic regulations surrounding toga color approvals were codified through a series of laws, which evolved in complexity alongside the empire's expansion. The Lex Toga Colorum, enacted in 212 CE, served as a pivotal piece of legislation that mandated a formalized process for toga color variations. This legal framework established criteria for color selection, requiring a 2/3 majority vote in the Senate for any new color to be adopted. Subsequently, the Lex Toga Variorum introduced the concept of regional color variations, allowing provinces to propose colors reflective of their unique cultural identities, provided they were submitted through a formal application process that included a rationale for the proposed hue. The application had to detail the dye source, the cultural significance of the color, and a proposed timeline for implementation. The bureaucratic apparatus responsible for overseeing these regulations was comprised of various committees, including the Toga Color Committee, TCC, which was tasked with reviewing applications. Each senator serving on the TCC was required to attend regular meetings, which often involved lengthy discussions, and at times, heated debates, over the appropriateness of proposed colors. The minutiae of these meetings, including the recording of deliberations and the drafting of minutes, contributed to an ever-expanding repository of knowledge regarding toga color variations. Part 11: Supply Chain and Logistics. The logistical considerations of toga color variations revealed the intricate supply chains that underpinned the Roman textile industry. The sourcing of dyes was particularly critical, as the Senate often had to consider the sustainability and availability of specific dye materials. For instance, the highly prized Tyrian purple, derived from the murex snail, necessitated a complex network of maritime routes and negotiations with coastal cities that specialized in its production. The Senate's discussions around logistics often included projections on dye yield, the costs associated with transporting raw materials, and the potential economic impact on local economies dependent on dye production. Additionally, the Senate took into account climatic factors that could influence dye production. For instance, a particularly hot summer might enhance the vibrancy of certain colors, prompting discussions on seasonal approvals for specific hues. The logistics of transporting togas, once dyed, to various provinces also involved meticulous planning. The Senate employed a series of quartermaster strategies to ensure timely delivery, which included establishing partnerships with merchants and ensuring that trade routes remained secure. The Senate's engagement with merchant guilds was crucial in this regard, as they often provided insights into market trends and consumer preferences for toga colors. Part 12: Record-Keeping Methods. Record-keeping methods surrounding toga color approvals were both systematic and exhaustive. The Senate maintained detailed annals, known as the Annals Toga, which chronicled every proposal, debate, and vote related to toga color variations. These records served not only as an archive but also as a reference point for future deliberations. The meticulous nature of these records was reflective of the Senate's commitment to transparency and accountability in its proceedings. The process of documentation involved several layers of bureaucracy. Initially, proposals for new colors were submitted in writing, and then assigned a unique identifier for tracking purposes. Each proposal underwent a rigorous vetting process, and the minutes of every Senate session were transcribed by a designated scribe, who ensured that all discussions were accurately reflected. This transcription process could be laborious, requiring the scribe to attend each meeting and capture the nuances of debates. To facilitate the storage and retrieval of these records, the Senate employed a classification system that categorized proposals based on color, region, and historical significance. Over time, this system evolved into a sophisticated database, which, while not digital by modern standards, allowed for relatively efficient searches through scrolls and tablets. The importance of record-keeping extended beyond mere bureaucracy. It served as a historical narrative of the evolving cultural identity of Rome itself, encapsulating the ongoing dialogues between tradition and innovation. In conclusion, the intricate tapestry of Roman Senate procedures for approving toga color variations weaves together regional distinctions, historical evolution, bureaucratic regulation, logistical complexities, and meticulous record-keeping. Each of these elements contributed to a process that, while seemingly mundane, was deeply embedded in the cultural and political fabric of Roman society. The story of toga color variations illustrates not only the significance of attire in Roman life but also the broader dynamics of governance, identity, and tradition, a testament to the enduring legacy of the Roman Senate. Part 9: Regional Variations and Comparisons. The intricate tapestry of toga color variations throughout the Roman Empire was not merely a monolithic construct but rather a nuanced mosaic, reflecting the diverse cultural and regional practices that flourished across the vast territories under Roman dominion. As Rome expanded, the local customs regarding toga colors were influenced by the indigenous practices of various regions, leading to an array of regional variations. In the provinces such as Gaul and Hispania, local artisans began to experiment with dyes derived from native plants, resulting in a palette that diverged significantly from the traditional hues favored in the heart of Rome. For instance, The use of indigo sourced from the woad plant became popular in Gaul, producing a deep blue hue that was occasionally favored over the traditional white toga. Similarly, the bright orange tones derived from the saffron fields of Hispania found their way into local toga variations, leading to some confusion during Senate proceedings, where previously established color codes became muddled. Furthermore, the regional variations were often codified into local laws, which, while designed to maintain a semblance of order, frequently led to bureaucratic entanglements. In the province of Africa, for instance, a decree mandated that every citizen could wear only togas dyed in colors approved by the local magistrates, resulting in a rigid hierarchy of color classifications that was as convoluted as it was tedious. This meant that even a slight deviation in hue could lead to severe penalties, including fines or loss of civic privileges. Comparatively, the eastern provinces, such as Asia Minor, showcased a proclivity for more vibrant and ornate toga designs, often adorned with intricate embroidery that told stories of local myths and legends. This visual extravagance would frequently clash with the more austere Roman ideals of simplicity and modesty, leading to lively debates in the Senate about the appropriateness of such displays. As the Senate grappled with these regional variations, the discussions often devolved into protracted arguments that belied the seemingly innocuous nature of toga color variations, revealing the underlying tensions between cultural expression and civic uniformity. Part 10: Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of toga color variations is not a static phenomenon, rather, it reflects the shifting tides of societal values and political climates throughout Roman history. The early republic was characterized by a rigid adherence to traditional colors, primarily white, which symbolized purity and virtue. However, as the republic transitioned into the imperial period, the colors of togas began to reflect the opulence and extravagance associated with imperial rule. During the reign of Augustus, there was a notable shift in the perception of toga colors, with the emperor himself setting trends that would resonate throughout Roman society. The introduction of the purple toga, a color historically reserved for emperors, began to infiltrate the wardrobes of the elite, creating a clear delineation between social classes based on toga color. This period saw the emergence of a bureaucratic apparatus dedicated to regulating the authorized use of certain colors, resulting in a complex web of laws that governed who could wear what color and under what circumstances. The subsequent Flavian dynasty further complicated the toga color landscape, as the emperors embraced an even broader spectrum of hues, including shades of red and gold. This era witnessed the rise of the so-called toga of triumph, a ceremonial garment worn by victorious generals, which was often emblazoned with rich colors and intricate designs. The cultural significance of these colors became intertwined with notions of power and success, leading to an influx of applications for toga color modifications that flooded the Senate. As the empire matured into the late imperial period, the extravagance of toga colors began to wane, reflecting a broader societal shift towards austerity and simplicity. The economic pressures facing Rome necessitated a return to more practical color choices, and thus, the toga evolved yet again. By this time, the bureaucratic regulations surrounding toga color had become so labyrinthine that even seasoned senators often found themselves flummoxed by the myriad rules governing acceptable hues, leading to a proliferation of scrolls and edicts that documented the ever-changing landscape of toga colors. Part 11. Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. The bureaucratic framework surrounding toga color variations was a formidable entity, steeped in a history of legislation that spanned centuries. The complexity of this system was both a testament to the Roman commitment to order and a source of immense frustration for its citizens. The Lex Togae, a body of laws instituted during the early Republic, served as the foundational legal text governing toga colors, laying out the permissible shades and their associated meanings. Subsequent amendments to the Lex Togae led to an increasingly intricate legal codex, as various senators sought to impose their interpretations of toga color significance. For example, during the tenure of Senator Gaius Fabricius, a series of amendments introduced the concept of toga suitability, which classified colors based on the social occasion for which they were deemed appropriate. A toga of bright red, for instance, could only be worn during religious ceremonies, while a subdued beige was considered appropriate for everyday civic duties. These regulations often resulted in lengthy debates within the Senate, as senators clashed over interpretations of what constituted an appropriate use of color. Moreover, the penalties for transgressing these regulations were often draconian. Citizens found guilty of donning unauthorized toga colors faced fines, public shaming, and even temporary exile from political life. This punitive aspect of toga color regulation served as both a deterrent and a means of enforcing conformity, as the specter of punishment loomed large over the populace. The bureaucratic machinery tasked with overseeing these regulations was extensive, comprising a network of local magistrates and provincial governors who were responsible for enforcing compliance at the grassroots level. As the centuries progressed, the process for approving changes to toga colors became increasingly centralized, culminating in the establishment of the Toga Color Council during the reign of Emperor Nero. This council was charged with the oversight of all matters related to toga colors, including the vetting of new dyes and the approval of color variations proposed by local artisans. The council's deliberations were methodical, often requiring extensive documentation and justification for any proposed changes, which in turn contributed to the bureaucratic quagmire that characterized this period. Part 12. Supply Chain and Logistics. The logistics of toga color production were as elaborate as the bureaucratic processes governing their approval. The supply chain for dyes utilized in toga manufacturing was a complex web of agricultural production, trade routes, and artisan workshops, all interlinked in a system that stretched from the far reaches of the empire to the bustling markets of Rome. The most coveted dyes, such as Tyrian purple, extracted from the murex snail, were subject to stringent regulations that dictated their distribution and use. The procurement of raw materials necessitated a sophisticated understanding of geography and trade, as regions known for specific plants or minerals were often the focal points of trade agreements. For instance, the indigo plant, vital for producing blue dyes, was primarily sourced from the provinces of Gaul and the Eastern Territories. Merchants would navigate treacherous routes, often braving pirates and bandits, to secure these precious resources, which were then transported to dyeing workshops. The dyeing process itself was labor-intensive and required meticulous attention to detail. Artisans would employ a variety of techniques to achieve the desired hues, often involving multiple stages of immersion and drying. Each color required a specific formula, often guarded as a closely held secret, leading to an underground market for dye recipes that flourished alongside the legitimate trade. The logistics of this process were further complicated by the need for consistent quality control, as any deviation in color could lead to severe penalties under the existing regulations. The transportation of finished togas to market was another Herculean task, often involving caravans that would traverse vast distances to reach consumers. The toga, by its very nature, was a bulky garment, necessitating careful packing and handling to avoid damage during transit. The synchronization of supply and demand in this context was crucial, as the timely delivery of togas was often tied to specific social events, such as elections or religious festivals. Part 13, Record-Keeping Methods. The meticulous record-keeping practices employed by the Roman bureaucracy concerning toga color variations represented another layer of complexity in this already convoluted system. The Romans excelled in the art of documentation, and the various iterations of toga color regulations were no exception. The Senate maintained extensive archives detailing the history of toga color approvals, including the names of senators who proposed changes, the rationale behind each decision, and the outcomes of subsequent votes. Scrolls, wax tablets, and codices were the primary mediums for record-keeping, with scribes laboriously transcribing decisions and debates in a manner that prioritized accuracy and detail. Each decision regarding toga color was meticulously documented, creating a historical record that was both comprehensive and ponderous. The sheer volume of documentation necessitated the establishment of dedicated clerks whose sole function was to maintain and update these records, a role that often led to the emergence of bureaucratic hierarchies within the Senate. Moreover, the introduction of color-coded parchments for documenting various toga-related decrees became a trend among senators, with each hue representing a different type of regulation. For example, green parchments were reserved for amendments to existing laws, while blue indicated newly proposed colors. This color-coding system, while intended to facilitate quick reference, often resulted in confusion as senators mistakenly referred to the wrong color, leading to misunderstandings and further legislative delays. The importance of accurate record-keeping extended beyond mere bureaucracy. It was also a means of asserting political power. Senators would often reference past decisions to bolster their arguments in debates, using historical precedents to advocate for their preferred toga colors. This practice not only emphasized the importance of documentation but also contributed to the formation of a political culture that was heavily reliant on the past, often at the expense of innovative ideas regarding toga color variations. In conclusion, the history of toga color variations in the Roman Senate is a labyrinthine narrative marked by regional diversity, evolving regulations, intricate supply chains, and meticulous record-keeping. Each facet of this story, while seemingly mundane, reveals the profound interconnectedness of culture, politics, and society in ancient Rome. The minutiae of toga color approval processes serve as a reminder of the complexities inherent in governance and the lengths to which civilizations will go to maintain order, even in the seemingly trivial matters of fashion. The monotonous history of Roman Senate procedure for approving toga color variations, Part 10, an examination of regional variations and comparisons. As we delve deeper into the intricate labyrinth of the Roman Senate's procedural machinations concerning the approval of toga color variations, we must first consider the regional variations that existed across the expansive Roman Empire. The toga, a garment of significant cultural importance, was not merely a piece of clothing but rather a symbol of Roman citizenship and social status. It is essential, therefore, to understand how local customs, geographical factors, and regional identities influenced the adoption and approval of various toga colors. In the provinces of Gaul, for instance, the adoption of toga colors was heavily influenced by the local climate and available natural dyes. The vibrant hues produced from local flora differed markedly from those available in the central regions of Italy. The indigo plant, for example, was widely cultivated in regions like Aquitaine, leading to a preference for deep blue togas among local elites. This contrasts sharply with the muted ochres and earthy tones favored in the Italian peninsula, where the availability of certain minerals and plant-based dyes facilitated a different aesthetic sensibility. Furthermore, the Roman Senate's approval processes often reflected these regional preferences, as senators from Gaul would advocate for the recognition of specific colors that held cultural significance. The political maneuvering surrounding these proposals often required a delicate balance of regional pride and adherence to the overarching authority of Rome. The discussions in the Senate regarding these toga color variations were not merely bureaucratic, they were imbued with a sense of identity and belonging. Evolution over different time periods. As we trace the evolution of toga color approval procedures over the centuries, it is essential to recognize the shifting political landscapes that influenced these regulations. Early in the Republic, toga color variations were somewhat less formalized, with local customs often taking precedence over centralized approval. However, by the late Republic and into the Empire, the Senate adopted a more structured approach to the approval process. During the reign of Augustus, for example, the establishment of the Lex Julia de Toga marked a significant turning point. This law mandated that certain colors be reserved for specific classes of citizens, thereby formalizing the previously informal practices. The introduction of this legislation resulted in a comprehensive set of bureaucratic regulations, establishing a hierarchy of colors: white for the general populace, purple for the senatorial class, and elaborate variations reserved for emperors and their families. The codification of these regulations led to an increased bureaucratic rigidity, stifling some of the more creative expressions of toga color variations that had flourished during the earlier periods. The Senate's obsession with maintaining order and clarity in the realm of toga colors often resulted in tedious debates and lengthy deliberations, as proposed colors were subjected to scrutiny based on aesthetics, symbolism, and societal implications. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The bureaucratic regulations surrounding toga color approval were labyrinthine in their complexity. Each proposed color variation was required to undergo a series of rigorous evaluations, commencing with a thorough examination by the Comitia Centuriata, the assembly responsible for voting on matters of significance. This assembly consisted of a representation of the Roman populace, whose members were drawn from various social strata, further complicating the process. Once a proposal had been submitted, it was assigned to a designated senator who served as the rapporteur, tasked with gathering opinions and conducting consultations with experts in the fields of dyeing, fashion, and symbolism. The rapporteur would then compile a report detailing the proposed color, its origins, and its potential implications for Roman society. This report was then subjected to a rigorous debate in the Senate chamber, often resembling a prolonged academic discourse rather than a straightforward legislative process. The debates could be excruciatingly tedious, with senators often quoting from historical texts and referencing previous decisions regarding toga colors. Each member of the Senate was required to express their opinions, leading to a lengthy exchange of views that could stretch into multiple sessions. The ultimate decision on whether to approve a new toga color variation was reached through a vote, requiring a simple majority to pass. Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of toga color supply chains also played a critical role in the Senate's decision-making process. The procurement of dyes was a complex endeavor, reliant on both local production and long-distance trade networks. Certain colors, such as the highly coveted Tyrian purple, derived from the murex shellfish, necessitated an elaborate supply chain. The harvesting of these shellfish and the subsequent extraction of dye was a labor-intensive process, often monopolized by specific coastal cities in Phoenicia. Senatorial debates often included discussions about the availability and sustainability of dye sources. Concerns over overharvesting or supply disruptions could lead to calls for restrictions on specific colors, as senators sought to ensure that the toga remained a sustainable symbol of Roman identity. The Senate frequently received reports from provincial governors regarding the status of dye production, which could significantly impact local economies and, by extension, the overall stability of the empire. Additionally, logistics extended to the distribution of togas themselves. The production of togas was primarily concentrated in urban centers, where skilled artisans crafted garments from high-quality wool. The Senate maintained a registry of approved toga manufacturers, ensuring that only certain establishments were permitted to produce togas in specific colors. This regulation necessitated a thorough understanding of the production capacities of various workshops, as well as their geographical distribution throughout the empire. Record-keeping methods. In light of the extensive bureaucratic processes involved in the approval of toga color variations, record-keeping became a vital aspect of Senate operations. The Roman Senate employed a variety of methods to document discussions, proposals, and decisions regarding toga colors, utilizing wax tablets and styluses for immediate entries during sessions. These tablets were then regularly transcribed into more durable formats, such as scrolls made from papyrus or parchment. The meticulous nature of Roman record-keeping meant that every proposed color, along with the associated debates and decisions, was recorded in detail. Acta Senatus, or the official records of Senate proceedings, served as a crucial repository of information. These documents were often cross-referenced with other records, such as those related to trade agreements and dye production reports, to ensure accuracy and consistency. In addition to the formal records maintained by the Senate, local magistrates also kept detailed accounts of toga colors being worn in their jurisdictions, often compiling lists that detailed the prevalence of specific colors among various social classes. These local records contributed to a broader understanding of toga color trends and preferences, allowing senators to make more informed decisions. In conclusion, the history of toga color variations and their approval processes in the Roman Senate is a multifaceted tapestry woven from regional influences, political evolution, bureaucratic regulations, logistical considerations, and meticulous record-keeping. Each thread of this narrative reflects the complexities of Roman society and the profound significance attributed to the toga as a symbol of status and identity. As we continue to unravel this history, we are reminded that even the most mundane aspects of governance can reveal deeper insights into the cultural fabric of an ancient civilization. The monotonous history of Roman Senate procedure for approving toga color variations. The toga, a distinctive garment of ancient Rome, served not just as a piece of clothing but as a symbol of status, citizenship, and political allegiance. The interplay between fashion and politics in the Roman Senate, particularly concerning the approval of toga color variations, is a remarkably tedious narrative, yet one that encapsulates the bureaucratic essence of Roman governance. In this comprehensive exploration, we will delve deeply into the historical figures involved, specific case studies, comparative analyses, archaeological findings, and primary source quotations, all to create an exhaustive narrative that reflects the prosaic nature of this legislative process. Minor historical figures and their roles. While the prominent senators and consuls often dominate the pages of history, there were numerous minor figures whose roles were pivotal in the mundane machinations of toga color approvals. One such figure was Gaius Lucilius, a lesser-known tribune of the plebs in 87 BCE, who famously advocated for the approval of a new shade of toga known as Candidus viridis, a pale green hue that was intended to symbolize freshness and renewal. Lucilius's pleas, although ultimately unsuccessful, revealed the intricate layers of political maneuvering surrounding such a seemingly trivial matter. His speeches, laden with rhetoric, aimed to align the toga's color with themes of environmental sustainability, a concept that, though anachronistic, illustrates the lengths to which politicians would go to gain favor. Another insignificant yet noteworthy figure was Marcus Tullius Varro, a senator who, in 45 BCE, proposed an amendment to allow the wearing of striped togas during ceremonial occasions. Varro's proposal, met with indifference, highlighted the tension between tradition and innovation within the Senate. His meticulous records of the deliberations, although rarely consulted, provide a window into the bureaucratic processes at play. Varro's contributions, while often overshadowed by his contemporaries, paint a picture of a Senate engrossed in the minutiae of fashion legislation. Specific case studies with dates. The history of toga color approvals can be dissected into several case studies that exemplify the procedural intricacies and occasional absurdities of the Senate. One such case occurred in 64 BCE, when the Senate convened to discuss the introduction of the Candidus aureus, a bright gold toga meant for special occasions. The deliberations stretched over weeks, with various senators debating the implications of adopting such a color. The main argument against the gold toga stemmed from its potential to disrupt social hierarchies. Senator Quintus Fabius Maximus asserted, To don the golden hue would be to invite the very chaos that our forefathers so valiantly resisted. The debates reached a fever pitch when a faction of senators, led by the ever-controversial Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, insisted on the toga being a reflection of Roman triumphs, arguing that a golden toga would symbolize victory and prestige. However, the opposition, spearheaded by conservative senators like Lucius Cornelius Sulla, stubbornly maintained that the traditional white toga was a representation of purity and civic duty. After a lengthy series of votes that resulted in a tie, the proposal was ultimately shelved, leaving the golden toga to fade into obscurity. Another notable case arose in 30 BCE when the Senate was presented with a proposal for a new hue called purpurea senatus, a deep purple reserved for high-ranking officials. The legislative process involved rigorous scrutiny of the dyeing methods, as the cost of Tyrian purple was exorbitant, and concerns regarding economic implications surfaced. Senator Tiberius Claudius Nero, who later became Emperor Tiberius, argued, "Why should we burden the treasury for a mere hue when our citizens suffer?" His appeal to fiscal responsibility carried weight, and after months of debates, the Senate approved the use of purple but limited its application strictly to consuls and other high-ranking officials. #comparative analysis with other regions. When comparing the Roman Senate's toga color approval procedures to those of other contemporary civilizations, such as the ancient Greeks, the bureaucratic nature of Rome becomes all the more apparent. The Greeks, particularly in Athens, had a more direct approach to clothing regulations, often relying on public consensus rather than a protracted legislative process. In Athens, changes in clothing styles were often debated in the agora, where citizens had the opportunity to voice their opinions more spontaneously. In contrast, Rome's Senate required formal proposals, multiple readings, and a series of votes that not only extended the process but also imbued it with a sense of gravitas. In ancient China, the bureaucratic system surrounding clothing color was also intricate, albeit different. The Han dynasty employed a rigid class system that dictated clothing styles and colors based on social status, with little room for variation. The emperor would decree the acceptable colors for each class, and any deviation was met with severe penalties. This system contrasted sharply with the Roman approach, which, while also hierarchical, allowed for some degree of discourse and debate among senators. In medieval Japan, the color of a samurai's clothing also indicated rank and status but was subject to the shogunate's whims rather than a formalized legislative process. The samurai class would often engage in elaborate displays of sartorial sophistication, but these were not bogged down by bureaucratic procedures akin to the Roman Senate's toga color discussions. Archaeological findings and interpretations. Archaeological findings related to togas and their colors have provided insights into the practical application of these procedures. Excavations in Pompeii, for instance, revealed remnants of textile workshops that specialized in the production of dyed fabrics, including those used for togas. Analysis of dye residues has indicated that certain shades were more prevalent than others, suggesting a correlation between availability, cost, and societal preferences. One notable discovery involved a collection of dyeing vats, dated to the 1st century BCE, which contained remnants of indigo and madder, both used to create various toga shades. This archaeological evidence aligns with historical accounts of the Senate's debates about color variations, as it underscores the economic factors that influenced the approval process. The existence of these dyeing facilities suggests that the Senate's decisions were not merely political but also significantly impacted the economy and trade practices of the time. Furthermore, inscriptions found on tombs and monuments often reference the colors of togas worn by the deceased, providing a wealth of information regarding the societal expectations surrounding toga colors. For instance, a tomb inscription from 25 BCE reads, "Here lies Gaius Marcellus, who wore the toga of Candidus, a man of integrity and virtue." Such inscriptions indicate that the colors of togas held deep cultural significance, serving as markers of identity and reputation. ##### Primary source quotations, invented but plausible. To further illustrate the tedious nature of the Senate proceedings regarding toga colors, we can draw upon invented yet plausible quotations that capture the essence of the discussions. In a session held in 43 BCE, Senator Aulus Vitellius was recorded as saying, "If we permit a mere change in hue, we may as well invite a change in the very fabric of our society." His statement reflects the conservative mindset that often dominated the discussions within the Senate. Similarly, during the contentious debates over the introduction of the Candidus Viridis, a senator named Decimus Junius Brutus exclaimed, "Let it not be said that we, the guardians of tradition, allow our togas to become a canvas for folly." Such sentiments were echoed throughout the Senate, demonstrating a profound resistance to change, even in matters as trivial as the color of a garment. Another fictional yet plausible quote can be attributed to the aforementioned Gaius Lucilius, who, in a passionate plea, declared, "The toga is not merely cloth, it is the very essence of Roman identity. To alter its color is to risk altering our very souls." This hyperbolic rhetoric reflects the emotional weight that toga color discussions carried within the Senate. ###Conclusion. In conclusion, the history of Roman Senate procedures for approving toga color variations is a labyrinth of minor figures, specific case studies, comparative analyses, archaeological findings, and fabricated yet plausible quotations, all intricately woven together to create a narrative that is both exhaustive and excruciatingly dull. The meetings often droned on, filled with repetitive arguments and drawn-out deliberations that would test the endurance of even the most patient observer. Through this meticulous examination, we come to appreciate the depth of bureaucracy that characterized Roman governance, particularly in matters as seemingly trivial as the color of a garment. It is a reminder that history is often composed of the mundane, and it is within the minutiae that we find the essence of a civilization. The intricate tapestry of Roman Senate procedures surrounding the approval of toga color variations, while often perceived as a monotonous aspect of Roman governance, reveals a complex network of minor historical figures and their roles in this underappreciated domain. Particularly, the legislative aspect of toga color approval is a microcosm of the broader Roman political landscape, where consensus and decorum were paramount. To understand the nuances of this process, it is essential to acknowledge the importance of the toga itself. This garment was not merely an article of clothing but a significant symbol of Roman citizenship and societal status. The color and style of the toga were meticulously regulated, with certain hues reserved for specific occasions and individuals. The toga praetexta, for instance, was a toga with a purple border, designated for magistrates and certain high-ranking children. In contrast, the toga candida, a bright white toga, was worn by candidates during elections, signifying purity and a clean slate. Among the minor historical figures who played pivotal roles in the procedural aspects of toga color variations were the aediles. These officials, tasked with maintaining public buildings and overseeing public festivals, were also responsible for the regulation of public decorum, which included the appropriate use of toga colors. An example from the records indicates that Aedile Gaius Lucilius in 123 BCE proposed a bill to standardize the shades of togas worn during the Ludi Romani, the grand games held in honor of Jupiter. His proposal, which was meticulously documented in the Senate annals, sought to ensure that all citizens wore the toga praetexta in a shade of purple that adhered to the traditional hue endorsed by the Senate. This bill prompted a lively debate. Opponents, including Senator Tiberius Sempronius, argued that such regulations stifled individual expression. Sempronius, a vocal advocate for personal liberties, famously stated, "The toga, in all its colors and forms, reflects the soul of the Republic. To confine it to a singular shade is to shackle the very spirit of our citizens." This sentiment, though compelling, was ultimately overridden by the Senate's desire for uniformity and order. The detailed records of such debates are sparse, but we can infer from secondary sources that Aedile Lucilius's proposal passed in a vote that saw a majority of 37 senators in favor, with 22 against. This vote set a precedent for the future discussions surrounding toga color variations, illustrating the delicate balance between individual expression and collective identity in Roman society. To further illustrate the procedural monotony, we can examine specific case studies that highlight the lengthy processes involved in approving variations of toga colors. One notable case occurred in 47 BCE when Julius Caesar, during his dictatorship, sought to introduce a new shade of green for the toga, termed toga viridis. The proposal was met with considerable resistance, primarily from traditionalists within the Senate, who viewed the introduction of a new color as a potential threat to Roman values. The Senate convened several sessions to discuss this matter, with records indicating that a total of 5 meetings were held over a span of 3 months. The minutes of these meetings, preserved on wax tablets, reveal a repetitive cycle of arguments both for and against the proposal. One senator, Marcus Antonius, noted, "If we allow for the introduction of a new hue, what next? Will we permit the colors of the Gauls to infiltrate our sacred garments?" His fear of cultural dilution echoed throughout the Senate chambers, causing many senators to hesitate in approving the new color. Ultimately, after exhaustive debate, the Senate voted narrowly in favor of the toga viridis, allowing Caesar to don this new color during public appearances. This case serves as a prime example of how even the most mundane aspects of Roman life were steeped in political maneuvering and the weight of historical precedent. Additionally, A comparative analysis with other regions of the ancient world reveals that while the Romans were deeply invested in the symbolism of toga colors, other cultures exhibited different approaches to garment regulation. In ancient Greece, for example, the use of color in clothing was less codified. The Greeks favored a broader spectrum of colors and styles, with garments such as the chiton and himation allowing for personal expression without the stringent regulations seen in Rome. This lack of formal color regulation in Greece stands in stark contrast to the Roman Senate's meticulous procedures, highlighting cultural differences in the significance attributed to clothing. Archaeological findings have also contributed to our understanding of the toga and its various colors. Excavations in the Forum Romanum have uncovered remnants of dyed fabrics, indicating the prevalence of certain colors in Roman society. For instance, a series of purple-dyed wool fragments were uncovered near the Curia, the Senate house, suggesting that purple was not only a color of the elite but also a hue deeply embedded in the fabric of Roman political life. The discovery of these remnants aligns with historical texts that describe the costly dyeing process, which utilized the mucilage of shellfish, thus reinforcing the association of purple with wealth and power. Moreover, primary source quotations, albeit invented but plausible, can shed further light on the attitudes of Romans towards toga colors. For instance, a fictional quote attributed to the historian Plinius Secundus in his work De Vestimenta states, "The toga, whether of white, purple, or any other hue, serves as a canvas upon which the identity of the Roman citizen is painted, each color a brushstroke in the grand portrait of our republic." Such sentiments encapsulate the reverence with which Romans regarded their togas and the significance of color in their societal hierarchy. In conclusion, the history of Roman Senate procedures for approving toga color variations is far from trivial. It is a reflection of the broader societal values, political dynamics, and cultural identities of ancient Rome. Through a meticulous examination of minor historical figures, specific case studies, comparative analyses, archaeological findings, and plausible primary source quotations, we can appreciate the depth of this seemingly monotonous aspect of Roman governance. Each toga color, each debate, and each decision carved a path through the annals of history, leaving behind a legacy that continues to intrigue scholars and historians alike, albeit with a certain monotony that may indeed serve to induce sleep. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our tranquil journey through the monotonous history of Roman Senate procedure for approving toga color variations. As we've wandered through the corridors of ancient governance, we've unraveled the tales of senators diligently gathering to deliberate over hues of fabric, the delicate intricacies of political discourse, and the profound significance these colors held in the grand tapestry of Roman society. It may seem like a simple subject, yet within the folds of every toga lies a rich narrative that reflects the complexities of human nature and the timeless quest for identity and self-expression. Throughout this exploration, we have painted a vivid picture of the Senate chamber, where the rustle of scrolls and the hushed murmurs of esteemed senators created a symphony of deliberation. We traced the evolution of toga colors, from the pristine white symbolizing purity and innocence to the deep purples reserved for the elite, each shade embodying a story, a purpose, a moment in history. We've meandered through the meticulous process of approval, an exercise in patience and decorum that reminds us of the importance of consideration and care in our own lives. As you prepare to drift into a peaceful slumber, let the gentle whispers of history wrap around you like a soft toga, soothing your mind and easing your thoughts. Remember the dedication of those senators, their unwavering commitment to tradition, and the elegance of their deliberations. Allow these reflections to guide you into a restful night, where dreams are painted in the colors of your own imagination, free from the burdens of the day. If at any point you wish to revisit our serene exploration, feel free to replay this lovely journey. Each listen can offer you a gentle reminder of the calm that can be found even in the most mundane of subjects. The rhythm of history flows like a lullaby, and I invite you to indulge in it as often as you desire. So now, dear friend, I wish you a night filled with tranquility and peace. May the soft embrace of sleep cradle you, and may your dreams be as vibrant and beautiful as the togas that adorned the senators of old. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let go of the day. Good night, and may your rest be deep and restorative. Sweet dreams await you.